And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host and author, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome you to the Celebrity Q&A with best-selling author and criminal lawyer, Marcia Clark, here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book, Trial by Ambush. Marcia, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thank you so much, Sara. Thanks for having me. This is so fun. So this book is about a true crime that was its own trial of the century back in 1953. And it involved the defendants in a home invasion robbery, burglary. Barbara Graham was the only female in the case, and she was one of the three defendants on trial. It was a heinous crime. Barbara was used as the lure to get Mabel, the elderly victim, to open the door. Mabel Monahan was the victim. She lived in this quiet little neighborhood in Burbank, California, lived alone, very security conscious, which is why everybody knew that she would not open the door for one of the men. So they used Barbara, who was beautiful and also very petite, non-threatening looking. So Barbara went to the door and said, my car broke down. Would you let me use your phone, please? And Mabel did. And as Barbara walked in, the men walked in behind her. She was later found strangled and bludgeoned to death in the hallway of her home. The house was torn up, blood on the walls, blood on the floor, the carpet's torn up, the whole house was turned upside down. They even went through the purses in her closet, all except for one purse that was hanging on the hook. And in it was left hundreds of dollars and all of this really expensive jewelry, diamonds, platinum, you name it. So the police found no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no nothing, no eyewitnesses, no evidence whatsoever. They didn't know who done it. And seeing a purse full of all of this money and cash and jewelry, they didn't know why either. It was a true mystery.
Well, it is a mystery that hooks us good. And I like how in the beginning, when you say, Mabel never opened the door, but she did to this night. And that was her fatal mistake. And it just was a moment that sets the stage for a mind-blowing, jaw-dropping case. And I cannot wait to get to hear about this case and to hear about your research process into this 70-year-old cold case. We have so much to talk about. I can't wait to get into every bit of it. First, I just want to welcome everyone because we are broadcasting live to 7 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. It is Mystery Monday. And because Mondays can be murder, we're going to make it a little less painful and get your week off to a killer start. So if you've been here before, you know the drill. And if you're new, welcome, friends. Here's the drill. Every Monday, I give you my handpicked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So ask Marcia about her creative process, her writing process, her research process, anything that you are wondering. Let's jump right in. Renee is joining us from Facebook saying, hi, Marcia and Sara from Southeast Florida. Hi, Renee. We have Kim joining us from Facebook saying, hello, book friends. We have Randy joining us from YouTube saying, welcome, Ms. Clark. It is an honor for you to join us. Indeed, it is, Randy. Thank you so much. Sharon joining us from YouTube. Happy Mystery Monday, Sara and Marcia. Oh, my goodness. We have Robin joining us from Chili Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Renee is saying, yes, this case sounds so scary. And I found myself thinking, I would have opened the door too if I saw this young, beautiful woman in a coat. Oh, my car's broken down. I'd be like, oh my gosh, come in. Let me make you some tea while you call a tow, service. And I think, one of the main points that you raise in this is that the world was so shocked that a woman could be part of such a violent crime. And you talk about that in the book. And let's start there with some of these, with some of this, the way that gender was handled, the way that Barbara was handled, because let's start with the shock first. A woman has done something violent. Marcia, let's get into it.
So I think anytime a woman is accused of a violent crime, even today, same thing, because that really is kind of a man bites dog story. Women are not typically associated with violent crime. Think Amanda Knox, think Casey Anthony. Anytime you have a woman acting in a violent manner and accused of such a heinous crime, especially murder, it's something that is in and of itself shocking because it is unusual. It is rare. And back then, I think almost a little bit more so because women were meant to be, back in the 50s, they put them on a pedestal in a way, then put them way below the pedestal in another way, treated them like second-class citizens. But they definitely expected women to be demure and to be, very polite and very restrained and, very civilized. And so the act of murder is not something that was ever associated with a woman. So when she was having a woman accused of a really brutal, heinous murder like this was in itself just a complete shocker. And it was something, of course, that would sell newspapers because it was so unusual, because it was so shocking. And the newspapers, all of the outlets just outdid themselves in describing Barbara's every move, every look, every glance, her hair, her clothes, her makeup, everything, in every single issue. And back then, newspapers were the main source. And they put out newspapers morning, noon, and night. I mean, they had constant stream of coverage, and they were all vying for eyes and for readership. So they were all trying to top each other in terms of sensationalism. And especially that meant Barbara was the focus, and always above the fold, big photographs of her. And the descriptions of her were always sensational. And by the way, largely wrong and exaggerated.
Well, you are here to set the historical record right, which is something that I think is so important. And you get into how, well, in one chapter, you end one chapter by saying, well, it made you wonder who was Barbara Graham. And you go deep into her heartbreaking story, her childhood. And we get to see who this woman was as a child, her abusive, horrible, negligent mother, and how she, how that may have shaped her. So let's talk about that. And Sharon saying, for all of us, how difficult was the research for this novel?
Shall I answer that first?
Yes.
I mean, this is something you can speak to, Sarah. It is really hard. It's a 70-year-old case. I wasn't even sure I would be able to get the trial transcripts. And the trial is what I really wanted to see, because what I saw of Barbara's history, she was a misdemeanor defendant. By that, I mean, she was somebody who did not have skills, had very little education, yet she was very intelligent. But because she had no skills, no degree, no nothing, making a living was a challenge, and she wound up doing the kinds of things that abused children who were raised in abuse and neglect do to make ends meet. They shoplift, write bad checks. She got married a bunch of times, and all of these were crimes of opportunity, none of them crimes of violence. That did not fit with the crime she was accused of here, a felony murder. So that in itself made me think, well, I got to find out what happened in this trial, because one thing here does not match the others. The two men sitting on either side of her were the thugs that they looked like they were, and the real killers. So the chase was on. I had to go and find, I had to go to different archives. First, I went to the county archive. That gave me the clerk's transcript. That turned out to be easier than I thought. But chasing down the state archives for the trial transcripts, that was much harder. And so at first, I wasn't even sure I could. I called the court reporter's office and I said, can I even get these? And my heart's in my throat at this point, because I really want to do this case, but if I don't find the trial transcripts, there's no book. And she said, well, what was the sentence? And I said, death. It was a death penalty case. And she goes, oh, we keep the transcripts forever. Well, okay, yay. But then where are they?
Where are
she
they?
didn't know that. So it took a lot of doing and a lot of asking questions and bumping around, but finally found that they were at the state archives. State archives then took their time. They ultimately gave me everything, though, all 4,000 plus pages of trial transcripts. So it was its own journey. I talk about that in the foreword to the book.
Yeah. And I was riveted for that journey, because anyone who has ever tried to research a case or their own family history or research anything knows that it's addictive. It's the waiting and waiting. And then you get a hit and it's such a high because you have it and then it's not what you thought it was. And it's such a low, but you keep going back keep going back for more. It's deeply addictive. And so when you go first to the county and they give you, oh yeah, I have it right here. Just, I'll come back and I'll give you, and then they quote, hand you only 1,000 pages. I was on that journey with you of the, waiting in the parking lot to see if they have it. Come back tomorrow. Here's the 1,000 pages. Sitting in your car, you reading the 1,000, realizing, wait a minute, for a case of this magnitude, 1,000 pages isn't, nearly enough, which you would know from, your experience as a lawyer. I would have thought 1,000 pages, that's a lot. But then you go on this longer, months-long journey of emailing back and forth of trying to get this and getting eventually those 4,000 pages. Describe the moment of getting those 4,000 pages in your hands and sitting down at your desk to open that box and dive in.
So I had actually a few moments like that. But this was the big one. This was the big kahuna, if you will, because I was very lucky in that, because this case was made into a film in 1958 called I Want to Live. This is an Oscar-winning film starring Susan Hayward. She won for Best Actress. And the producer, Walter Wanger, saved all of the paperwork that went through his hands, which included letters that she wrote to her lawyers, included a critical report about one of the players in this case named Donna Prow that was a gold mine that no one had ever seen, in addition to also the original statement given by the state's star witness, who was an accomplice, who was, I call him the ironically named John True, and truth had very little to do with his testimony. So I had gotten all of that, and that was an amazing treasure trove of stuff that no one had ever seen before. But then when they delivered the boxes, I'll never forget looking down and thinking, could that really be it? Could that really be it? What if it's just a bunch of random papers? What if it's just a bunch of ancillary information that doesn't do anything? I need the transcript. I need the words that were spoken in court. And I was almost afraid to open the box. I'm like, this is it. So I almost closed my eyes as I opened the box, cut the cord around it, and pulled off the lid and looked down and saw Volume 1, Reporter's Transcript. Yes. Thank God. And then I dug through the rest of them. Oh God, let me make sure I have them all. I had them all. Boy, did I.
Marcia, it was so thrilling. As a researcher and as a reader, I celebrated that moment of victory and can only imagine, having chased those down for months, to hold them in your hand and to read the words as they were uttered in court by all of these witnesses, by everyone involved in the case, what I had tingles reading it. That moment of you holding it just was so thrilling. Oh my gosh. So, and I think also what was really, because the first 1,000 pages was actually something I didn't even know existed, which was court is adjourned, court comes back. I'm like, I didn't even know that they recorded that. Something else that really caught my interest was that you said the reason you wanted these trial transcripts was because you feel that they are the truest source of information, as opposed to, for instance, the scandalous newspaper headlines and that of course are trying to sell copies. This to you was the truest, and it caught my attention because I thought to myself, and you would know better than I, of course, but don't some things get excluded from evidence and some things can't, not be allowed into evidence or to be part of a trial? But even in spite of that, you still felt that this would be the truest source of information.
Well, yes. Number one thing, yes, there's always what we call pretrial hearings, and there was in this case too, except that in this case, the pretrial hearings were very brief, and there was literally almost nothing that wasn't admitted. There was one very key witness testimony that could not come in because a statement, that is, because he was no longer alive. But other than that, the jury pretty much saw what they had, what they were willing to divulge, because a very key statement was suppressed by the prosecution and hidden and never showed to the defense. So that is a different story. But the reason I say that is these are statements taken under oath. And most people do take that oath very seriously to tell the truth. So you get a more complete picture. I mean, when you read a newspaper article, you're getting somebody else's summary of what they see. And the reporters don't necessarily even understand a lot of what the lawyers are doing and saying. So you get misinformation as well, not on purpose, but because they don't understand what the motion means, why the objection was overruled or sustained, that kind of thing. And it can be very important. As when it comes to the witnesses, though, you're going to get the true skinny, not just what somebody summarized or not just what the reporter thought is the most sensational thing, but all of it, and you get it in context. So it really does tell you, get as close as you can to the truth of the case by getting the trial transcripts. I don't think I would ever really want to write about a true crime story without getting the trial transcripts, because that's where it really all happens. And then you get to the most interesting part of all, which is why the jury did what they did. I always find that fascinating, always have. So you can, in hindsight, when you read these transcripts and then you see the verdict, you can kind of figure out where they were landing and what was most impressive to them and what they didn't seem to grasp or what they did seem to get. So it presents its own mysteries as well as its own solutions.
Well said. Well said. So Renee is wondering, how long did the research take you, and how long did it take you to write the book? Great questions, because it was as we said, months and months just to get the transcripts.
Yeah. So the research took about 6-7 months.
Wow.
Once I had all the information, then I had to read it all, and that took a couple of months. And then the writing of it, but I'm taking notes the whole time. And I'm kind of taking notes and reading and writing. And as I'm writing and breaking down chapters and thinking about it, the book is starting to come into shape. So by the time I actually sat down to write the book, it didn't take that long because so much was already done. I would say the actual writing took 4 to 5 months.
Wow, that's really fast, Marcia. Oh my God, teach me your ways. It took me 10 years to write mine. I'm in awe. Oh my God, I'm in awe. Oh, Anissa Joy has a good question. Is there a case that you would like to write about, but you can't get the research that you need?
Well, not yet. I don't know of one. So I don't. What would I do if I couldn't get the research that I needed? I couldn't write the book. So that would be the end of that story pretty fast.
You could write it as fiction, as a legal thriller. And Marcia, one of the other many things I loved about your book is when you were talking about waiting for this case to come along, and you just said, that at first you had thought, as I did as well, I'll just have an open mind and let the universe, bring me a case. Is that not enough? Turns out it wasn't. It wasn't enough. And I underlined that part. I was like, at least I'm not the only one thinking that. Oh, I'll just, well, I'm ready to catch the case that falls into my hands. But I'm also a bit of a mystic, and I do, believe in universal energy. And I always notice that as a reader and as a writer, we are drawn to certain stories. There's an infinite number of books that we could read. We could read every day, all day, and still not read all of the books that are out there. And still not write all of the cases that are out there that are available. So what compels us to write about the cases that we write? What compels us to read about the books that we read? And there's always, I think, I would notice something within ourselves that draws us to that case, that draws us to these characters, real or imagined. In your case, very much real. And as I was reading, this became really clear to me. But in your words, why do you think that you were drawn to this case?
There's so many answers to this. So there were a lot of there was a big thing in that seeing a defendant who doesn't seem to fit in a case. Her history, what little I knew even from the beginning, kind of struck me as weird. And they had stood her up in the newspaper accounts. They had stood her up as the mastermind, kind of as the key defendant in the case, which turned out to be complete nonsense. That wasn't at all true. She was nothing but a decoy. That's all she was ever meant to be. So that struck me. But then there were all these little things that, like, for example, the house where it all happened, the Burbank house where Mabel Monahan lived, was about less than 2 miles from where I was living when I was trying the Simpson case in Glendale. I was living in Glendale at the time. I knew exactly where Mabel Monahan lived. I knew exactly where that was. The lead DA in the case, J. Miller Levy, was an icon in the Los Angeles District Attorney's office. And it was almost a standing joke for us anytime somebody lost a case or a motion, we'd always joke, well, J. Miller Levy could have won it. So it was like, one of those things. And so there was that. And then the gang that did the murder and the robbery met at the Smokehouse, which is across the street from the studios. And I'd been to that Smokehouse restaurant a number of times. They have the best garlic bread. But there were all these little things that, that kind of made me feel like, boy, it feels like it was meant to be. There's so much connection to this case. And then there were the aspects of the case that I just personally found intriguing. Like Mabel Monahan, the victim, was a really trippy, cool lady. She had been a vaudeville trouper and a roller skater. She met her husband, who was a world-renowned ice skater and roller skater on the vaudeville circuit, and they became a duo, performing all over the country. And then they had a daughter. The daughter was a performer as well. She married a casino operator, Tudor Scherer, who was trying to actually run a speakeasy called Ships that was in Venice, California, off the dock there. And I saw a picture of it. It was a trip. And he had a speakeasy in it where, he sold booze during Prohibition until it was clear that Prohibition was going away. And then he segued into gambling, but Mickey Cohen, the gangster that ran Los Angeles, was into gambling. So he had to leave. He decamped to Las Vegas, but he was tight with Mabel Monahan. So when he divorced her daughter, he remained friendly with Mabel Monahan and would come to visit her whenever he came to town. And that's why people, the bad guys in Los Angeles, thought that there was money in her house, because Tudor Scherer, they assumed, I think somebody just made it up, honestly, that he was hiding cash in a safe in her house. And that's why he kept visiting her, not just because they were friends, which is really what they were. So in the very beginning of the case, the cops went straight to Tudor Scherer, thinking it was somebody who worked for him who did this murder. And he said, no, I'd never keep money in a house. That's ridiculous. You're just asking to get knocked off. So all these like weird twists and turns, personal connections, and then just personal fascination for that era. It was, one thing after another just kind of sprung up, and I just found it all of it so intriguing and so interesting.
It's so fascinating because I love the backstory on the victim, Mabel Monahan, because first of all, I want to invent a time travel machine and go back and hang out with her, because she's one cool lady who goes out and plays poker with her friends until 1 a.m. and then goes out for lunch at 1 a.m., rolls in at 4 a.m., makes breakfast for her and her friend Merle, who's visiting, again, this retired vaudeville. What a cool lady. I want to go play poker with her, go out for lunch at 1 a.m., roll back in at 4 a.m., have breakfast. What a hoot. I mean, she is so fun and so cool. And you make her such a three-dimensional character, because another issue that I have with crimes and the portrayal of them, both on the book page and the newspaper page, is that this vibrant, incredible human being gets distilled down to the worst moment of their life, which is the last moments of their life, which is purely them as a victim. And it makes me so angry and so sad, because they were way more than this. They were a lifetime of this. And so to get to know Mabel I could picture, with these fun, these colorful, vibrant details of, her husband was a roller skater, ice skater. They were vaudeville actors. I mean, I could get a real sense of her, and, the picture of her looking over her shoulder in this coiffed 1950s do. And then how she came to have this house, which was because her daughter divorced this casino guy and inherited the house. She didn't want it. It was full of bad memories. So she gives it to her mom. And what starts out as this incredible blessing of, a free house, ultimately, because of the source of the house, becomes the reason that she dies. And that twist of fate was, just made me wince. And you brought it to life so well. And another thing I really enjoyed about the book is that, Marcia, you're funny. You're really funny. There are these moments of dry these quips of humor, and where I'm laughing out loud in your portrayal of, everything from the introduction to moments where you're, narrating the book. And I really enjoyed that. You're such a great writer, and the moments of humor were so fun as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. There were times that I just couldn't resist, and I took a lot of jabs at the press for the way they described Barbara. It's like they broke out the thesaurus and just started, adding adjectives almost randomly. At one point, they talked about her face being a fleeting mask of hatred. Well, how do you have a fleeting mask? I mean,
I don't know.
A mask cannot fleet.
It cannot fleet. Oh my goodness.
It was kind of, they got a little ridiculous with that stuff.
Indeed, they did, with that and many other moments, and I appreciated you calling them out on that. Readers got to read. Welcome to the conversation. She wants to know, did Barbara have any allies? What about defenders outside of the courtroom?
She didn't. It was really interesting to me. The press was in lockstep with one another. They were just, all of us, them ran to the one end to make her a villain. They called her Bloody Babs. She was the cold-hearted, evil, temptress, seductress, murderess. They ran out of adjectives to demonize her. And all of them did it, all of them. There was not one dissenting voice. And at the same time, they were treating John True, the accomplice, who probably really was the one who pistol whipped Mabel Monaghan. And then they treated him like the coming savior. He claimed that he was trying to save Mabel from Barbara. And it was an absurd claim. And everything, the way he described even the struggle with Mabel Monaghan, made no sense. And I go through that in the book and show how, physically speaking, this could not have happened this way. It just couldn't. And yet the press was completely credulous. They accepted every word he said as though it was gospel, which was astonishing to me, that there was nobody to say, hey, wait a minute, until the very end of the trial. And it was just before she was actually convicted. One of the reporters who was working for the San Francisco Examiner, Ed Montgomery, he wasn't in the courtroom. He was getting the information from people in the courtroom. And he was another one writing all of these vilifying stories about her, about how guilty she was. But then he went to court and he watched her, and he watched the two defendants, the two men seated next to her, and thought, something's wrong here. I don't think I have this right. And he became her champion. Unfortunately, it was too late. By the time he really went out after the truth about the case, she had already been convicted. But he then left no stone unturned. And it was largely because of him that the story came to the attention of Walter Wanger, the producer who made the film I Want to Live. But he never stopped trying to see her conviction reversed, and to stop her from being executed in the gas chamber. He really went all out to try and help her. But he was alone. And J. Miller Levy took off after him and accused him of lying and accused him of making things up and claimed he was never in the courtroom. And it became a whole Donnybrook between the two of them. But she really had no one in her corner, no one, other than her lawyers.
The book is out now, and you can get your copy from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, that is Murder by the Book. So whether you're watching with us on Facebook or your YouTube, here is that link so that you can click and order your copy of Trial by Ambush. And the good folks at Murder by the Book will ship this out to you first thing tomorrow morning. So get your orders going. Renee is saying, isn't it often that way, Marcia? And that she would have that she would be skewered in the press. Let me ask you this, because one thing I couldn't stop wondering is, do you think it would be different if this case was tried in 2024?
In some respects, yes. In some respects, no.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still big news when a woman is charged with a violent crime. As I mentioned before, Casey Anthony, Amanda Knox. I mean, Casey Anthony clearly guilty to me, Amanda Knox not. And right from the start, too, I thought that the case struck me as non-existent. They thought they were making a big deal of finding her DNA in the sink and in various areas of the apartment. She lived there. Of course, you're going to find her DNA. What do you expect? So, it was a ridiculous case. But nevertheless, big press, lots of press, Foxy Noxy, as you recall. So I think in that respect, it would be the same. A woman charged with a violent crime is always going to be an attention grabber. What will be different, in my opinion, today is that you will have dissident voices. Now we do have people who are willing to speak out. We have, if nothing else, we have podcasts, we have Substacks, we have YouTube, we have places that people have access to where they can voice a differing opinion. And I think they would. I think that people now really enjoy all these outlets and the ability to speak out, whether they agree or disagree. So, and that can really balance out coverage by the mainstream media that might be a little too one way or one-sided.
I do. Yeah. I think one of the things that fascinates me, I love historical and I love true crime. So this is in my sweet spot. One of the things that fascinates me the most is how much has changed, because now we would also have DNA technology. We could see if John True's touch DNA was on Mabel, maybe on the tie with the knot around her neck, around some part of her. We would have the technology to pull that off. And if Barbara's DNA was nowhere near nowhere near Mabel, the victim, we would have that information as well. So just technologically, we have really advanced techniques now that they couldn't have dreamed of in 1953. And what also fascinates me is how absolutely nothing has changed. And as you just said, a woman who commits violence is still something that shocks us to our core, that fascinates us to our core, and that the portrayal of that woman then has to be made to fit into our narrative, into our cultural narrative. So they change the portrayal of who that woman is to fit into these ideas of who we believe that women must be. And that becomes a kaleidoscope of, well, now, as you said, she's got to be a femme fatale from a la Raymond Chandler. She's got to be this, other thing that maybe she isn't at all, because we have to make it make sense through the lens of our cultural narrative.
Exactly. And so the more things change, the more they stay the same. So you can hear people in today's world complaining that the mainstream media seems to always, cleave to one particular point of view and stick with it. And you really do need the balance of whatever other voices, whether it's television or not. Like you have MSNBC and you have Fox News, and these are two polarized views of things. But where's the middle? Where's somebody who's just got a balanced, nuanced, contextual view of what's going on? And that's, I think, something that is still missing in our mass media world. I mean, you can find it probably in the smaller venues, in podcasts, for example, that talk about the news, but it's still problematic today. And I think that's why these older cases, when we research them and we find that the more things change, the more they stay the same, it's surprising. It is surprising when you say we have technology now. I will say handling appellate cases, which I do, court-appointed appeals, I can tell you that it's getting more and more rare to see a case where the issue is identity, where we don't know who done it. That's getting more and more rare because we have Ring, we have citywide cameras, we have DNA, there's so many ways and the cell phone technology is incredible. So, I mean, if you have a phone and you haven't figured out how to turn it off when it's appropriate, you can really, they get a wealth of information is found in those areas. So it's more and more true that crimes are, who done it is not the issue. It's what done, what was the intent, what was the motive. That tends to be more and more it. Nevertheless, if you have a female defendant, there's going to be a whole different kind of attention paid than if it's male.
But at the same time, another thing that I was fascinated, and this will probably be no surprise to you, Marcia, given the line of work that you do, but I was shocked that with the technology that we have today, 30% of murder cases are still unsolved in the US today. And that number goes as high as 40 to 50% in predominantly Black areas like Houston, Detroit, and other inner cities. And I am sort of just, I read that and did not a double take, a triple take, a quadruple 10 times take, because it seems unfathomable to me that we have such a high unsolved rate, although that does include when they do know who done it, but they can't prove it, because knowing who done it and being able to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt are two different things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly right. You may have a lot of information and you think you know who did it, but if you don't have enough to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, you don't have a case. So there's that. There's also the lack of resources, something that you still see, especially in the older cases. And don't forget that these crime statistics of unsolved include cases that have been languishing for quite some time.
I didn't know that.
Cases, and evidence gets lost. And if a body is not found within a very short period of time, you lose evidence immediately, because the body gives you so much information. So there's that too. So the DNA doesn't work if the body is completely decomposed. Sometimes it still can. I mean, we've gotten DNA off of mummies, but it just depends on the circumstances under which it's found. And then, but you also have the issue of resources. Not every lab is equally equipped to do as much DNA testing or gunshot residue testing as they need to do for any particular case. And they all have backlogs. Can be enormous in big cities like San Francisco or Los Angeles. And so that's another issue. There are many reasons why you still have the unsolved rates that you do.
Oh, thank you for that insight. I hadn't thought of that, and I didn't know that. Thank you. Randy is saying, I'm just saying, I would love to see a book written about you by you. Your history has intrigued me for years. Marcia, any memoir in the works?
Last thing. Yeah, I got to say, they say never, but I pretty much feeling like never, because I don't find myself very interesting, and I can't write about something I don't find interesting.
Marcia Clark, you fascinate all of us. You are such a brilliant and fascinating woman and professional lawyer. And I mean, I think the rest of us would be very fascinated. So you have to write what you feel passionate about, but do know you would have readers. So thank you for that. This book is generating amazing press. And I want to share the review from Publishers Weekly, who deemed this masterful and awarded you a starred review. So congratulations on that. I'm going to pop it up so everyone can read it, because I thought it was so earned. They said, I'm just going to pop up for a second. The former lead prosecutor in the O.J. Simpson case brings new insights to a sensational killing from the 1950s in this standout true crime narrative. Impressive research combined with breakneck pacing and a trenchant critique of the media circus surrounding Graham's arrest bring the verdict down decisively in Clark's favor. This is masterful. That is from Publishers Weekly, again, who awarded you a starred review. And I just loved that they acknowledged and praised not just the research, which is an inordinate amount of work, but also your ability to, quote, pair it with breakneck pacing, which is a whole other separate set of skills. And I think you did that so beautifully, ending each chapter with a cliffhanger, with a question, with something that I said, oh my God, I have to read the next chapter. It kept me up late into the night reading. What's your creative process like?
Well, I have to say, in this case, I got very lucky because there were so many cliffhangers. Yeah, I mean, it provided so many twists and turns. There were so many, it almost told itself, the story. I just had to organize it. But honestly, there was one bombshell after another. First of all, in the crime itself. Second of all, in the investigation. Third of all, in putting together the case for the district attorney. And then, of course, the trial. The trial led from one cliffhanger to another just in the course of the trial, which is why the courtroom was packed with spectators every day, because you read the newspapers and like, what's going to happen today? Because something outrageous seemed to happen constantly. And then you have Barbara taking the witness stand and being cross-examined by J. Miller Levy. That was a hugely dramatic turn of events. It was just an incredible story. So I got lucky to have such amazing material. Kind of, as they say, it writes itself.
To be fair, 4,000 pages of trial transcripts would not be a breakneck pace. That takes probably a lot of caffeine and an incredible eye for detail to keep, pushing through that and to pull those moments out. So what is a day in the life of Marcia Clark, the writer, like? I got to get 1,000 words down a day. I'm not getting up until I get that chapter done. Or are you, writing when the spirit moves you? What does that your creative process look like?
So it really does have to do with juggling the caseload and whatever else I'm doing, plus the book. But I try to sit down with the book. Either I block out a couple of days where I can, or I block out a part of the day to get through. I do it usually by subject matter. Let's talk here about Baxter Shorter. He's the first lead that the police had, who, after giving an incredibly complete statement, he disappeared. At the point, at the end of a shotgun. So he was kidnapped, never seen again, and believed dead. But so I'm going to tell all about the finding of Baxter Shorter. And then the next day, I'm going to tell all about the finding of John True, who turned
Ooh.
state's evidence. And then I'm going to, you know what I mean? So I do it by subject matter, usually not by page count,
Oh,
because,
interesting.
yeah, it pulls me through. I think I'm more productive if I talk about it in terms of each section as a story in itself.
I love that. And I've never heard anyone else. 450 interviews in, Marcia, you are the first person who has ever said that. What a fascinating perspective. I love that.
It was just lucky, Sarah. Really, you know, this particular case gave me that opportunity to do it that way. But talk to me when I do my next one, because it might not be this easy. So we'll
Well,
see.
on that note, Marcia, what's next for you?
That's it. I think I really do want to write another true crime novel. True crime, not nonfiction. True crime, nonfiction. Remember that. But
Teen true crime, reporting for duty.
yeah, right, exactly. And you know, Mark Twain had this great saying. He said, "Fiction is obliged to deal with possibilities. Truth
Ooh.
isn't." And that is why I love true crime so much. It can be so bizarre, so jaw-droppingly insane, but it's true. So what can I say?
Oh my gosh, I've never heard that Mark Twain quote. So the one I always go to is truth is stranger than fiction. And I think he's right. And the burden on a fictional writer, on a novelist, is to make an imaginary world believable. And even if you do your very best job, that there will always be some portion of readers who say that would never happen. He would never say that. She would never do that. A young, beautiful woman with a tough background would never be accused of murdering a 64-year-old former vaudeville actor in the privacy of home and not taking the purse full of jewels and $5,000 in cash. But the beauty of true crime is that you can say, oh, but it did. And
Yeah.
here's how it went. So I absolutely love that. You guys, the book is out now and you are not going to want to miss this. Whether you are a true crime junkie like me or whether you're new to true crime, you will love this book. It is page turning. It is, as Publishers Weekly said, breakneck pacing, married to incredible research. Make sure you get that. Here again is the link to order your copy from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, Murder by the Book. Click and order now. Marcia Clark, it has been a pleasure to interview you. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us the inside scoop. Thank you to all of my mavens who have been here, who have asked questions, or who have just watched. I see you lurking, and thank you for lurking, and thank you for being here. I hope your week is off to a killer start. And Marcia, please come back and chat with us when your next book is out. Y'all, that's
I sure will. I definitely will. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you all. Have a great night.